All right, wonderful. So the first poet, Krikor Der Hohannesian's poems have appeared in over 175 literary journals, including South Carolina Review, Atlanta Review, Louisiana Literature, Connecticut Review, Comstock Review, and Natural Bridge. He is a three-time Pushcart Prize nominee, author of two chapbooks, Ghosts and Whispers, and Refuge in the Shadows, as well as a full-length book, First Generation. Ghosts and Whispers was a finalist for the Mass Book Awards poetry category in 2011. Anyone wishing to purchase a copy of his latest collection, First Generation, can do so. And what we'll do is when he's reading, I'll gladly type in the information in the chat. So please welcome to the mic, Krikor. Krikor.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everyone hear me well enough? Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
This is the book. This is a book I've been actually meaning to write my entire lifetime, and finally got around to it at age 83. It's entitled First Generation, and it's dedicated to my maternal grandfather, Aranag Nazar, who fled Turkish Armenia in 1910 to escape the Armenian genocide, along with his wife Gulenya and 4 young children, one of whom was to become my mother. He was a writer and a political activist, making him a marked man. Upon settling in his new country, he founded the first Armenian language newspaper, Baikal, in the United States, and was an advocate throughout his life for acknowledgement of the genocide. My love for writing began at an early age as I sat by him at his desk, watching him pen his editorials and write his poems and short stories. Then too, I felt his great unspoken sadness at having been uprooted. Some of the poems in First Generation attempt to slide beneath the shield of that which he kept to himself. I can only wish that I have done him justice. The book is divided into 3 sections, basically covering the 3 major periods of my life. And I'll be reading 3 or so poems from each one of them. They cover childhood, adulthood, and old age. From the first section, the first poem is entitled The Secret. Always in whispers among the elders, the unspeakable, the weight of Ararat atop a mystery not for public consumption. Old Armenian men hunched on cane-backed chairs, sipping Turkish coffee in dim, smoke-blue cafes. Sotto voce exchanges punctuated by a knowing nod or an arched eyebrow. Gazes wandered, eyes now and then misting over. Hiding, that's the word for father in Armenian, by the way, refusing to speak English. Nene helpless to control the spit which spewed from her mouth when uttering the T word. Rubbing her nose, still unable to rid the stench of rotting corpses, piled high on makeshift drays, catafalques for the slaughtered. Shame given no words stalked the psyche, grief snuffed, losses left to history, and uprooting unappeased by the promise of America, enemy our lot. We, the next generation, inquired with trepidation. Armenians, we were told, were smart and hardworking. The past had been stolen, not worth dwelling upon. It belonged to those from Hayastan and not us, their children. My next poem is entitled The Birth of a Poet. A single moment branded upon the young psyche, not the mark of Cain, but a blessing. A lover's heart etched deeply on furrowed tree bark. Callow child peering in the doorway, Hayari grandfather hunched over his writing table. Trespass upon hallowed ground, I feared. And then the moment. A beckoning nod, the quickening smile puckered at the corners of his mouth. And oh my, that seductive twinkle in his eyes. A wave of his well-gnawed fountain pen bade me sit. A tousling of my hair and back to work. a river of discourse flowing in strange, squiggly-looking characters of Armenian script. I was awash in his serenity, basked in his aura, smelled the sweetness of his presence, wishing to spend the rest of my life in that room. This poem is entitled American Dreaming, circa 1946. It begins in the current day and then goes back. The turnpike, a fresh gas through the backyards of close by two-deckers, the high whine of sleek cars fully appointed with the latest electronic gizmos. 16-wheelers laden with tons of China plastic, busloads of seniors bound for the slots at Foxwoods. The stink of diesel exhaust acrid to the nose. The lure of a better life bleeding out in the wake. Once there were different sounds. The frolic of children at play, the shrill of madres and mutis and mairigs and mas and matkas calling their flocks to supper. Once there were different smells. The sweet of garlic, of earthy yeast and bread baking, of fresh laundry hanging out to dry. Once, too, there were aspirations. We, like Tantalus, a gaping maw and lust for Madison Avenue's dangled grapes. TV sets, cars with hoods the size of flight decks. The dream made manifest. Richie's Familia, 11 strong, first to bite. A 9-inch black and white RCA that drew every kid on the block. Moths to a flickering screen. Me and Richie, let's just say we had other ideas, like sneaking a nip of Pepino's homemade Vino Rosa, the garage dark, the caddy's hood, the ding shield, the booze harsh at the back of our throats. This is from the second, these poems coming up are from the second section of my book entitled Passages, which is sort of midlife. First poem is entitled The Survivors. Of those who weren't shot straight off in their homes or left hanging like rag dolls in town squares. Some stuffed brooches, pendants, gold fillings into body crevices. Others a family portrait, a wedding picture strolled under threadbare sashes. Or for the more practical, larder scraps to the last march for who knew how long to come face to face with the ground upon which God spat. So, my children, I have no story to tell if Hype Nazar hadn't escaped the bloody clutch of Enver Pasha and Talat Bey. From the refuge of America, it is left to you to hold those birthplaces with strange names, to pass on the tales of those whose histories survive only as faces in grainy sepias, or a gold ring engraved with a name, a date. The next poem is entitled Cabaret. We went to a lot of cabarets when we were young. Everyone ogles a belly dancer who is certainly worth watching if that's what you came for. Frenetic hands whirl, cutting imaginary parabolas. The blue smoke haze caressed into seductive curlicues. The staccato clack of finger cymbals punctuates the frenzy of hips, tempting paunchy middle-aged men to stuff neatly creased dollar bills under skimpy straps, others bolder yet. But I am drawn to another pair of hands, flailing a dumbek, pounding out a primal rhythm that reaches across the ocean of red cloth tables, calling, calling. The next poem is entitled The Cherry Tree, which was inspired by a visit to my grandparents' grave. My grandparents were from Aintab, Cilicia, which is now basically southeastern Turkey. The Cherry Tree. Forgotten corner of the caliphate, mother's birthplace, she uprooted it too. a tramp steamer to Salonika. Otherwise, another statistic in the 1.5 million or worse, a concubine in some pasha's seraglio. Cousin Anahid went back. The family home survives. She is eager to describe. Her mother made the trip at 100, her voice awash and weeping the entire stay. Don't tell me, I plead, the pomegranate trees, the bushes hunched with pistachios, the smell of lamb spit roasted, the line dancing, the happy voices. It all disappears if you tell me. Pamuk says Armenian houses and cars are ghost houses, haunted by specters that wail bloody murder. One by one, the last of those who survived April 1915 pass on, the thread phrased to a wisp. 5 decades I have pondered going back. Would I spit on the first Turk I saw? Tell me to my face, you still deny it, tell me. But I fear the ghosts. I fear mourning what was never mine. The grief that belongs not to me, but to those who gave up their birthright. Instead, to those who survive, instructions. Fill my ashes into the patch at Mount Auburn where their bones molder. Wait till April, I say. The cherry tree rooted to the graves will be in full bloom then. These poems coming up are from the last section, entitled The Eternal Flame. First poem is entitled, What Do You Do? There's an epigraph I put in here. Armenian grief is a fathomless, boundless sea. Hovannes Tumanyan, 1903. He was an Armenian poet who was killed by the Turks subsequently. What do you do with the ghosts of melancholy that lurked in dark, dusty niches? What do you do with what lies hidden like a smoldering peat bog? What do you do with the thirst for what was lost, hanging like beads of fog on the skin? What do you do?
Sorry, we just lost you there, Krikor. I'm not sure what happened.
Krikor, you're on mute.
Could you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, shall I start this poem again?
Yes, please.
Okay. This poem is entitled, What Do You Do? Armenian grief is a fathomless, boundless sea. This is an epigraph by Hovannes Tumanyan, who was an Armenian poet and was written in, he wrote in 1903. He was killed by the Turks, by the way, in the genocide. What do you do? What do you do with the ghosts of melancholy that lurked in dark, dusty niches? What do you do with lies that lay hidden like a smoldering peat bog? What do you do with a thirst for what was lost, hanging like beads of fog on the skin? What do you do with the weight of the unspeakable, the grief which you could not lift? These tears I shed that fall on your headstones under the weeping willow, these tears are for you. This next poem is entitled Walking Towards the Edge. This is part 1. How do you measure silence, its vacuum of sound, dead air, absent before the storm? What happened to the Armenians? Silence, a thief that steals off before sunrise, and you awake to a voice saying, you are on your own. A storm that defied description, that wiped out all in its path, no tales from those who survived. Part 2. You need to grieve, she says. How does one grieve absence? It's nothingness. I have walked towards the edge many times, excitement in my step, pulled by the wish for freedom, its promise of release. Yet a hesitation as I near. the fear that I will no longer recognize myself, that I am staring at death, the paradox of its comfort. So much for grief, the cold ash from a fire that never burned. This next poem, next to last poem, is entitled Requiem, written for my mother. Can you still hear me? Ooh.
Now we don't hear you.
You put mute. Okay, you're fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. This next to last poem is entitled Requiem, written for my mother, who was the one who came over when she was 2 years old when my grandfather fled. Mother, dear mother, last of those from home, with your final raspy breaths, the eternal flame shivered briefly with remembrance for all those whose blood has long since dried to dust, whose mutilated bones augment the scree upon rock-strewn plateaus, where once our forebears grazed sheep, gathered pistachios, and harvested figs and grapes. In the shadow of Ararat, churches of bygone Byzantine grandeur molder on once fertile plains, now barren of a way of life. The wind whistles through where sublime frescoes and stained glass once glowed, testaments to the glories of God, now only a memorial to his departed flock. Almost a century has passed. Fresh rumors float on the wind. Osmond's descendants intend to plow under all vestiges, once and for all to silence the screams, the pleading, the cursing against a forsaking God, the raging against their butchers by ghostly spirits. But for the Brutus in their midst, so they might assuage guilt, expunge sins, bury the lies. Anatolian breezes will forever betray them, bearing bone dust and blood motes into every fissure and crevice where Armenians once lived, where you, mother, once lived. And the last poem, fittingly, is entitled The Last Day. When I lie on that last bed, on that last night, what might I wonder? Whether I was deceived, and if so, by whom? Or was I my own Judas, the one who pretends things are not as they seem, that there is no beauty in this devilish world? I would have all the evidence a man could need if that is where I chose to look. I confess to having traveled that stone-strewn road, the one awash in a cloudburst of sorrow, ruts cut deep from promises not kept. Beauty has no address on this God-forsaken path, yet we walk it, searching for the one house where regret no longer resides. It would be easy to choose instinct, to run like a spooked rabbit caught in an open field, desperate for cover, the beckoning shelter of the tree line. Or I could remember watching my children burst from the womb's comfort, the sunrise on those days like none other, the moon those nights a sliver of a smile, peeking between silhouetted trees. Thank you. Did everybody hear that? God, honey, it keeps going off. Okay,
Yes,
did you
we heard
hear
it.
the last poem? Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you, Krikor.
Thank you.
All right.
Krikor, you have me crying. Gulam, gulam.
No,
It's awful. Why did you make me cry?
no, I'm sorry.
Oh, we need to cry. We need to
Yes.
know. We need to cry.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Yes. So I'm going to invite Krikor to put his mic on mute so that I may introduce Alexis Ivey, the next poet.
Okay.
Thank you. Alexis Ivey is a 2018 recipient of the Massachusetts Cultural Council Fellowship in Poetry. She is the author of Romance with Small-Time Crooks and Taking the Homeless Census, which won the 2018 Saturnalia Editors Prize. A Boston native, her poems have been displayed in City Hall and featured by Mass Poetry aboard the Red Line subway. Her poems have recently appeared in Saranac Review, Poet Lore, and Sugar House Review. She works as an advocate for the homeless in Cambridge and teaches in the Poem Works community. Please welcome Alexis Ivey.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, New England Poetry Club, for inviting me to read today and to be sharing the virtual stage with Barbara and Krikor. I'm going to begin reading from my new book, Taking the Homeless Census. The poem, An Ars Poetica. Poems come to me smelling of trash can fire and whiskey, the smell I am to launder off, and I give each a bedroll. It's my life, full time. I live in this smell. I conjure this smell, sleep with this smell. I can't write another sonnet. These poems homier, like to camp with a blanket on public cement. Poems believe in no rules. Ruleless is cozier. And so the poems stay with me where they're not being held accountable for making my bed, being responsible. I thought I could write them asleep in my unmade bed. Every evening they strike my last match. Burnt, sulfury, needy. I need them to revise the fire in me. Outreach. Winter finds him on the train station floor, sleeping in the shelter blanket I gave him, beneath the alewife sign in Bedlam's lower weather. I bring him socks, toiletries, bring him a woolen hat. I show up. I always come here, kneel beside him, his shelter, his prayer, his street. My knees kiss the tiles to face him. Can he hear the worry in my voice? His eyes are worried blue. Doesn't he want to live just a little longer? Most of him seems mostly warm. Midnight, I'm in the station. It's perfectly dead, no passengers. He wakes to sleep and sleeps so I'll wake him. I'm his moonlight and sun, the stars I spare. My smoke's all smoked, lost or broken or shared. Boss's daughter. I own less than 1% of the company and have to pay taxes in so many states that I have a tax guy. Actually, I'm tied to my family so much, it's their tax guy. In the wallpaper business, it's my job to write descriptions. I teach folks to see what they're looking at. I make florals flowery. I name colors and patterns. Green isn't green, but fresh water, plantain green, highway sign green. We manufacture too many greens, like T.S. Eliot says, not enough of what I meant at all. I make the unremarkable remarkable. The color Arizona because it's prettier than the color sand. Pine cone I call country chic. The thesaurus is my job's best friend. I found 31 different ways to say manly. Gallant, bold, darling, dignified, noble, rugged, withstanding. Paisleys are noble. My brother, withstanding. My cousins in the front office I'd categorize as grasscloth, beige and malingering. They crunch numbers, manipulate data. My father's in sales, makes deals and shakes on them. My uncle is the CEO, his agenda, tedious arguments. He oversees the whole rolled up shebang. I write stripes the size of narrow streets. Even try to name the office carpet stains, abstract sunsets, the office layout I'd name maze or labyrinth. One Friday, while taking inventory, the new warehouse worker appears at bin location 23, pattern number 148-37524, the wavelengths print. His skin is as beautiful as toile. I'm starving for a fairy tale pinned and wriggling as I count the rolls of cameo rose. One lone rose 6 inches from the next lone rose. I know flowers are the acrobats of wallpaper. They bunch, trellis, arrange, toss, print, trail. Never do what true flowers do. Change. I'm kind of trying to find the most love-themed ones to celebrate Valentine's Day. So that's the theme I'm going on. I've eaten spicy. I know which diners have homemade hot sauce, which have Frank's Red Hot, which serve Tabasco. Dried ghost peppers make me sweat. I pour red pepper flakes on anything Italian, so hot I'm tongue burned and my nose gets all runny. I've scared some people. I like the bottom of an omelet always burned. I like things burnt. Toast too crispy, home fries overdone. I like what's hard to cut. I always have. The fallen cake that doesn't sit right. Coffee grounds that end up floating in my cup. Wilted greens. Anything out for too long. The poem shows up at my door. I buzz him in for Captain Crunch because the milk in my fridge is on its last day. By the end of the bowl, we're naked. He counts the freckles on my back and stops at 54. Then we say freckles until freckles doesn't mean a thing. Later, I'll write his 6 tattoos. His teeth leave squirrel prints across my shoulders, a belt of stars around my throat. Should have worn a scarf to write this one. Missing the poem in Europe. 1. From the bottom of the fire escape, a man calls up 6 flights. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. My hair isn't long enough. I don't toss down my room key. The hotel management has called. Have I seen anyone creeping around on the fire escape? 2. Every night I'm in Barcelona, I write what I'm wearing, how many men looked at me. I'm a heartbreaker. Every morning I almost write. Instead, I count how many times I can kick a rock while walking the streets. 10 times, 20 times, before I lose it to the city. 3. I'm reading of Mice and Men, a few miles south of Soledad. I know that Soledad is Spanish for lonely, but I don't tell the poem that. The pinup girl I want to be is a poster hanging in my closet, is all oops, my top is falling off, holding a rose, pink, practically with her fingertips, petals babying her nose. Even I can smell that arousal as she embraces her right breast. Chin up, she's revving for a downtown night. Her other hand plays with the telephone cord, tempting with moves unmoved. Is she answering that call or hanging up? I can choose any misconception I want. She's on her back, one knee bent and the other crossed over, high heel dangling. She's pinned here, all satin in a classy broad way, poised in forever, forever. Radical surgery. Let me show you the scar waist deep down my chest, deep enough to deserve a get well card. I was just being born to be cut open and stitched the way a sparrow knots its beak in sandwich crust. My body turning blue like it was winter at the beginning of July. Still I dress for weather and any Sylvia Plath sky. The moon has nothing to be sad about. I rely on that moon, my courage as deep-wooded as a star's. If I point to my heart like my hand's a gun, would you love me? The poem as metaphor. I bring home a hermit crab in his shell from Cape Cod, set him up in a fat glass jar with other shells he can move into, serve him cut kale. I figure he's having the time of his life, feeling nothing of October in my bathroom with the heat cranked. I tack a map of his island behind his jar, name him Wellfleet so he won't be homesick. It's my say-so, my playing God. I'm the gull he hides from. I give him salt water, which only makes him scratch at air. I try to sit him on dirt from my tomato plant, but it doesn't work. I suppose he needs the island I took from him. On every tree at the reservoir. There's a missing boy poster. Had he gone for a swim too cold, fallen in, wanted to see city lights bounce off the water? On every tree his flannel shirt plaid and nondescript. What keeps me is how much I don't know him, how much he becomes known for being missing. I mean, he disappeared on this path like a magician's hat disappears. I walk the reservoir where they search for him, don't give up until he's found there. For me, he stays on the bottom, even after he's floated up. I'm going to read some of my latest love poems in honor of Valentine's Day. Breakup Gifts, a lyric. He gave me a broken mug, I sipped around the chip. Gave me a desert, a compass, don't get lost, so I'd be his. I gave him a piece of coral I hated parting with, perfect heart and hand shape. I'm so good at good-heartedness. I gave him thermals, a calendar of pinup girls to light him up. I won't stay his centerfold, his love, the one with eyes, a bottomless cup. He gave me his life, dead at 44, just so I wouldn't have to give up my belongings anymore. Finding my disposable camera in a travel bag. I hope the pictures aren't of Spain 3 years ago. I'd prefer a ticket stub to the Alhambra more than those Moorish tiles I could find on a postcard. Or are they my photos from the Kiss concert, the black and white faces I liked best, the fan who had the longest tongue, of me wearing my one black shirt, fire on the stage, Allie woo-hooing until she loses her voice. No, they're the shots my mother made me take of my cousin's baby shower because she couldn't be there. Or are they the smoke from my hookah, smoke that you said looked so sexy leaving my mouth? I have a feeling you are on them, us on Halloween, a couple of scarecrows, hay in our flannel pockets, painted stitches on our faces, straw brimmed. They must be those pictures of the moon, before I knew the moon wouldn't come out well. On our first date, we stare into the river. You ask me how I feel about the moon, what it looks like in the river. Like a white flamed fire, always catching and always caught, never staying put, breath on its wick, waving, waving. I tell you the moon is a woman. She is all feelings. You put your lips to my neck to smell the rose on me. Kiss the dark of what I cannot see. This next poem is a sonnet. Our place. And suddenly we are living together. All this becomes ours. It's torturous. And I wish I could live with this, be more into his Patriots posters. Nope, I make a fuss. Certain things I'm picky about. For example, I find my boyfriend's belongings corny. Those Star Wars toys, the Chewbacca candle. I hate that unlined journal he gave me. I decide what pleases me, what doesn't. His popcorn maker. Actually, I just may be picky about everything. My journals have to be lined. I need to choose them. Only me. I can't say how anything is loved by me. I can't explain. It just gets loved. One bedroom on the 4th floor. I am Wilma Flintstone. Everything I've brought is wooden or wicker. Love the natural look. I paint my nails the color of abalone. I am all about leather. Wherever I can have a hide, I put a hide. Whenever I buy something that plugs in, I feel extinct. My boyfriend is George Jetson. He's brought wires that go to everywhere, light up devices, useful electronic everything. We decide to alternate every living room shelf and each claim our bedroom nightstands to decorate our own way. The one item of his that I can relate to are his wooden salt and pepper mills. I think he likes to crush things, but I would never tell him that. And after 3 months with him in mind, I don't go overboard at Goodwill. I won't buy things just for me. It's us these days. I have my own favorite dish soap. He has his. I can't stand the smell of Dawn. Mine doesn't really take the grease off. He likes getting all the grease off. I've taken over the whole living room with the keepsakes of our nice days, a pine cone, a trail map, a diner's placemat. My space spreads. I'm not good at sharing. I didn't realize I had taken up so much space. Space. It's what we need as reminders of how amazing we are with each other and without each other. This next poem is a palindrome. Shared title. You say we should own something together. I want a car, my own car, not to share. Old car, not like other cars, easier to know it's mine. I've spent my whole life not having one. Is joint ownership of a 1979 Jeep Wagoneer with wood paneling something I can adjust to? I've grown into being your emergency contact. Am I ready to look in the rearview mirror without asking, is this mine? Without asking, is this mine? Am I ready to look in the rearview mirror I've grown into? Being your emergency contact with wood paneling, something I can adjust to as joint ownership of a 1979 Jeep Wagoneer. I've spent my whole life not having one. Old car, not like other cars, easier to know it's mine. I want a car, my own car to share with you. Say, we should own something together. And my last poem is another sonnet. Like I said, Happy Valentine's Day, a self-love poem. I buy myself postcards of everywhere I've been. Without a postmark, the look I go for, vintage. A crowded San Francisco cable car in sepia, or a faded scene, fences aged, barely holding up, like in the pastures of Steinbeck novels, how green a green pasture can be. The cards I wish for, I buy, don't wait for them to be sent to me. Each card stays unfilled out, stays unrenowned. That's my blank message from me to me. Stow them in the second drawer down to look through and find my needs. Get well with its undying painted bouquet. Bon voyage, where the girl waves the ship away. Thank you so much.
No, put our video on.
Wonderful, excellent. And I will take a moment to make sure that I'm including Alexis's information in the chat. So you'll see that her website will be in a chat.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Alexis.
Thank you for having me.
Next, I will have the joy of introducing Barbara Thomas. All right. So Barbara Thomas grew up in the Lask Green Valley. She earned a master's degree from Boston University in education and taught English and reading in the public schools for 35 years. Barbara is an active member of the New England Poetry Club, the Greek Institute, and Glenbrook, an environmental writing group in New Hampshire. She was a Joiner Center participant for 10 years and received the Jeff Mayle Award. Her most recent book is The Last Green Valley by Cedar Grove Press, 2019. Other publications are a chapbook, Seduced Sighs of Trees, and her poems have appeared in the Paterson Literary Review, Fiele-Festa, Lalitamba, and several of the Bagel Bards Anthologies, among others. Her recent book, The Last Green Valley, can be purchased on Amazon. Please welcome Barbara Thomas.
Should I read from here, or how do I get the screen?
You're all set, Barbara.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm going to read from The Last Green Valley. First, I want to thank everyone, the New England Poetry Club, for having me, and my writers group, and dear friends. Most of the poems in The Last Green Valley take place in the quiet corner of Connecticut and also in Greece. They kind of go one after the other with some deviations, but they tell the story of my family, my childhood, a family of Greek Americans who settled in the quiet corner. Vorios Epirus, northern Epirus, a place of boundary disputes, a borderland, a place that is no longer, the place my mother was born. The geography of my mother's homeland imprints my mind with washes of color, verdant green, stone gray for mountains, emerald for the Aous River. Air so fresh you can taste it, my mother said. She lived with her mother, father, uncles, grandmother in a great stone farmhouse. They raised sheep for wool, wheat for grain. When she drew water from the community well, she saw veiled women carrying urns on their heads, tinkers who came by. They celebrated baptisms, name days, weddings. Her face was radiant when she spoke of violets by rushing streams, picnics, her beloved grandmother. When my mother was 12, Greek schools closed. Brother betrayed brother. Her father, in New York City for 5 years to earn money, came back and in a ship of thousands brought his family to America. At my grandmother's each Sunday, we are full of avgolemino soup, chicken, baklava. We crack red eggs on Easter, look for the good luck quarter in the meat pie on New Year's Day. We don't talk about times in northern Epirus, now southern Albania. Voices. This is how I could hear what was going on, everything from my bedroom window when my relatives and neighbors gathered. Voices reached my bedroom window. Relatives and neighbors gather by the weeping willow, summer evenings for coffee and stories. How my pregnant grandmother lost her baby on the big ship, her wails unheard. How my grandfather, farmer, cab driver, store owner, brought his 2 brothers over. How he bought land, 20 acres of hills, valleys, fields, cows, goats, chickens, pigs, 2 pintos. How the town took much of it away for a penny for flood control. How the children played and blessed the land, America. My Aunt Annette's laugh floats up with a night song of crickets. I often wandered around those 20 acres of my grandfather's land when I was a child, the sheltering. Next door, grandfather sits on his worn chair by the window. I hear strains of Ipiroti music as I walk by on the stone path. The clarinets lament, the bouzouki's wail. Aunt Penna is driving her tractor, the hay baler rhythmically dropping honey-colored squares onto the field. My grandmother is baking. That fragrance wafts through the open door. I am tempted to stay for bread and homemade butter, but the pasture where the horses graze call me. The valley where I go to sing among wild goldenrod and daisies, underbrush burrs sticking to my clothes and skin. Along the canal, vines hang like snakes. We swing up on them and over this meandering waterway that leads to the Quinnebog. If there is wholeness, it is here. The smell of cut hay, wind through trees, the river, the sun on my back. And because we lived out in the country, kind of in the middle of nowhere, we made up our own playing games. And one of our favorite things to do was to go swim in the mud hole, which was about an hour and a half from our home. Mud hole. To get to Codis's Pond, my brother and I walked from Fabian Road into a meadow that smells of wild geraniums. Sunburnt grass almost covers my head. Wet arms, legs, clothes. We braid dandelions, pick buttercups, pass coiled, sunning snakes. Don't, I say when he picks up a rock. I put the buttercup under his chin. Do you like butter? He just laughs. At the pond, we set down our knapsacks filled with sandwiches, juice, and towels on a cool, damp bank in the shade of the maple trees and race into the icy spring-fed water. We play all afternoon in the shallows where the stream feeds into the pond. Swish, swish, coarse, wet sand over our bodies. Swim to wash it off again. Check for leeches before the hot walk home. We also had many customs in our village of Fabian. I think it was just a few hundred people who lived there. And one of the big events was Memorial Day. And this is entitled Memorial Day 1952. My mother in a white linen suit holds her baby stroller. Neighbors and children in our Sunday best wait in front of the P.O. General Store for veterans in uniform and the VFW band to unpack drums, bugles, trumpets for the Memorial Day march to Fabian Cemetery. As the sergeant reads the honor roll, I grasp my mother's hand. Johnny Petluck, Theodore Angelo, Vangel Constantine, soldiers from our village killed on the Pacific Front. We joined the parade, following the Girl Scouts with their yellow bandanas, the Boy Scouts who hoist American flags from their belts. At the cemetery, veterans a symbol among the gravestones of the combat dead. They too, like statues. I stop at the edge of the road. When the bugler plays taps, I brace myself for the 3-gun salute, the sound of casings dropping on the grass. My father maintained our family by operating a woolen mill that he and my uncle built by hand. And that was for a long time. The mill, everything was running fine until the hurricane of 55. And this is called wild music. When I walk downhill to the bridge, I can hear the echo of machines clanging in my mind, weaving worsteds, cashmeres, garbadines. I hear the rush of the river. My dad's first mill went down into the swirling waters of the Quinnebog in the flood of 55. I still smell raw wool and grease. See my aunts Olga and Penna sewing and spinning, my mother finishing the cloth, checking for flaws. Now, no mill waste sullies the waters. The Quinnebog is lazy and clean. In the broken dam, trees grow in cracks. Water churns only through the trough. On the day of Hurricane Carol, when the bridge came down and the mill collapsed, machine parts washed down in the fierce current with rooftops and dead pigs. The people of Fabian Village stood numb on top of the hill. I held the motion picture camera as steady as I could, filming the devastation, until a fireman yelled, "Inside, get inside." Telephone wires came down like whips in the rain. In the comforting shelter of home, my mother and father talk low in the dark room, planning their next move. Another mill, another place. The mill built by my father and Uncle Louis destroyed. Their dream, our livelihood. Now, when I walk down to the Quinnebog, it is packed with fish. Fishermen cast their lines from the bridge. Kayakers put in beyond the dam. And in the empty space where the mill once stood, an artesian spring gushes still water. Clear water, sorry. And so then my father and my brother started another mill in a nearby town called North Grosvenor. And they worked that for about 10 years when a tragedy happened in my family to my brother Paul. And it took me a long time to be able to write anything about him, for this tragedy, an accident that happened in the mill called Requiem for Paul. I spent years exploring where the wind blows, hoping for a west wind, a sweet wind. That was before the tragedy that caught you in the winds of time, in the machine spinning wheel, dear brother. All hope gone, your light was mine. Pain is a furtive teacher, leading me from shadowlands through moonlit dreams that bring your spirit near. Finally, iridescent as a child's joy, the wheel turns. Lessons from my father. When my father was teaching me how to drive, he got me so nervous I kept stalling the car. I drove as far as Beano's convenience store as he yelled instructions in my ear. Then I stopped and he took over. But there were other times when he took me to the window to show me the arrival of a new bird. When he drove me around the back roads so I could collect money for the Red Cross, watching me to be sure I was safe from the barking dogs. Years later, I realized how hard he worked, 7 days a week, long hours to keep the mill going, getting new orders, afraid the business would fold. He told me stories nights at the Colonial Club after seeing Mom in the hospital. I got to know him then. After my mother died, my father and I took a trip to Greece together to visit the places they had gone to together. And this is called Santorini Blue. My father fit right in. Jaunty fisherman's cap, weathered skin, ageless at 85. My mother was from the north, but their last journey together was in the Cyclades. Distraught for a year after her death, he had one wish, to go back. I took care of his hurt leg and fatigue, but the real medicine was Greece. We taxied daily to a cafe on the Caldera, enveloped by blue, listening to Theodorakis' litanies. We gazed down at an unwrinkled sea, light transforming us. And then I took several trips to Greece, and one of these places was on Red Beach, on the island of Santorini, Fiera. Melina's Taverna. Walking from Red Beach, after swimming in the crystalline sea, we climb over rust-colored cliffs to lunch at Melina's Taverna, near the site of Akrotiri. A child is fishing on the pier, where the owner leads us to a wooden table by the sea. He asks us to pick out our own fresh bream for him to grill. Children are playing cards and laughing in the back room. A black lab barks and crackles, surf crackles rocks on the shore. My mother often said, people in the old country were not poor in spirit. When she left northern Epirus, her family cut strings of attachment. One remaining string carried me back to see what was lost. The family at the table next to us nod and smile. We share fish and bread, the finale of raki, and something sweet. Along the years, many things have changed in Fabian Village, and this is kind of telling a little bit about that, called Changes. Fishermen use the cleaned up Quinnebog to catch trout. Kayakers launch from a new landing near the sturdy bridge built after the flood of '55, after Dad's mill went down. Looms and machine parts wash downriver along with dead animals, rooftops, debris. The post office general store closed years ago. No more waiting by the bronze veterans plaque to march with the parade on Memorial Day, the quarter mile to the cemetery. Across the street, two small houses have replaced Mr. Eno's once elegant white colonial. My brother David lives in our sturdy home, retired, carrying on with painting and metal sculpture. Mr. Prince sold his 10-acre farm at the junction of Fabian Road and Highway 131, the little bit of heaven farm, a new blessing, where I stopped to watch the horses and the Shetland ponies graze, unaware of their own beauty. Little seems changed, but much has on this road winding through the valley. The quiet corner, the only darkness in the sky on an Atlantic coast sparkling with industrial light. Along Fabian Road, the night sky is filled with stars. And I have three new poems. Seems I can't stop writing about the same themes. And this one is called Prayer. And it's, I just kind of wrote this one day when I was going to the house in Connecticut where I go quite often now. Prayer. Turning off Highway 101 onto Fabian Road, I slow down to see the horses grazing on the sloping hill, a black mare, 2 pinto ponies. On the gray pavement, the road, lit in places by bands of sunlight and tree shadow, winds and curves. I pass a generation of homes, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandmother, grandfather, feeling surges of familiarity. I pass my house, wooden, old-fashioned, sturdy, ragged with memory, and reach the bridge just in time to see the sunset through trees sprouting from the broken dam. And then I have 2 more. And this one is called the Quinnebog. It's the river down the road. And it seems I have quite an affinity with this river because I always run down there whenever I get to Fabian. The Quinnebog, midnight. The open window in my bedroom lets in country air. Heavy rain falls on the grass, saturates the earth, stirs my dreams. The river calls me. By dawn, the rain is light as I walk to the bridge, current still white-capped. I think of that hurricane of 55, the devastation. When the storm passes, soft ripples surfaces like glass, sunbursts. Why was I drawn to the river? Perhaps my dreams, feelings since childhood, that intimacy, sacred still. There are changes above the broken dam, a greening wetland. Clean water flows over the dam, rushes through the trough. No waste floats downriver from the big mills. The Quinnebog, my umbilical cord to nature, has new life, a return to the way she was, where wild birds flock, fishermen come. My last poem is dedicated to the memory of my brother Paul, whose birthday was yesterday, February 13th. Before poetry, chrysanthemums, for Paul, 1946 to 1988. In my family's sorrow, they asked me to write a poem for the consecration album to honor his memory. So hard to find the right words before poetry became a lifeline. Perhaps the untimely death of my cousin Chris, perhaps the sight of chrysanthemums at the Star Market on Christmas Eve brought back those lines I wrote over 30 years ago. In quotes, how we hope our love reaches you to the eternity where you are, how we keep with us always your quiet strength and many kindnesses. The chrysanthemums fill my arms. I cradle the silky white petals. Their scent in my being, your light in the world again. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And in fact, I'm so overjoyed that we have easily over 60 people on as part of this. Can we unmute for a quick second and just give a wonderful resounding applause for all 3 poets, please? As I shared with, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Maria Luisa. My joy is being one of the advisory board members of New England Poetry Club. I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts, and this is my second time joyfully hosting the New England Poetry Club Poets Reading New Books. And with that stated, we do want to build in time for a few minutes if poets who are present want to respond, to any of the poets who shared, because we'd love to hear that, and then we'll transition to the open mic.
Barbara, it's wonderful to hear your beautiful poems. It's Elizabeth. I haven't got a picture for some reason, but I'm here and I loved your reading. And the other poets were wonderful as well.
Thank you.
It was wonderful having both Krikor and Barbara doing their poems of the immigration. That was just it worked together lovely. And I love everyone's work. And the love poems for Valentine's were wonderful too.
I'd like to, is Barbara Green Sion here? And I'd like to congratulate all of the poets. I thought the poems were just wonderful. They resonated with me, and a particular thank you and great big hug to you, Krikor. Are you still there? He's gone.
No, he's here. It's Judith Kneen window.
Yeah. I thought it was very interesting to listen to these very distinct voices. And I was very happy the way Alexis was bookended by people who were seeing different things, different memories, and different ethnicities, and hearing from two older people and a younger person with different perspectives on language and the use of language. It was very stimulating to me. I wrote to everybody, but unfortunately, I wrote only to Hillary because I don't really know how to run the chat. So what I wanted to say is thanks to Krikor, Alexis, Barbara for a richly rewarding reading, and thanks to New England Poetry Club for hosting it.
Other responses? Wonderful. So one before we start with the open mic, I just wanted to share with you one of my traditions as a poet to support poets is I of those poets I will buy 2 copies of their books, one for my own personal library and one to give away.
Mhm.
And then in terms of my fee, I love to share back. In terms of Krikor and Barbara, for me in Krikor, you're such a stark landscape. Landscape of pain. And for me, it's a transporting trauma you cannot touch. Reconstituted memory. And with Barbara, in terms of both of you, for me, and Mary Ann Myers here, she'll smile at this. Both of your works, had the cultural code switching, number one, but most significantly for me is that it was fascinating that I felt as if we could practice reverse ekphrasis. So imagine that somebody's reading your poems and they're creating a landscape based on your poems, and Krikor's landscape is going to be very stark. I see the ghostly artifacts that are evanescent and lost. And then with Barbara, just as, again, this reverse ekphrasis, having the images transport and reclaiming culture, reclaiming and resisting against the silence of older generations. And then with Alex, I marveled so much at your adept use of forms. And I was like, oh my gosh, because we know as poets, it's like we want to work with content and structure. We want to make sure that the structure is invisible. Because if it's too self-conscious, like, okay, wonderful exercise. But Alex, in terms of the epistrophe, the epistrophe, the palindrome, the sonnets, I was marveling at your dexterity. And also one of your writing signatures is listing as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for our guest poets. And I'm going to turn it over to the open mic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it is a real challenge. So I think,
Well, thanks to our wonderful readers, and thank you, Maria Luisa. That was a wonderful comment about each reader. I'd like to welcome you to the open mic now, and our first reader will be David Wyman.
Oh, thank you. I'm new to the New England Poetry Club. Am I on? Is it okay? I am? Okay.
Anybody who's not the poet reading, if you would please mute yourself. Anybody who's not David Wyman.
Okay. So as I said, I'm new to the New England Poetry Club, just having joined last year. And this is my first event. It's really been pretty cool. And so hopefully I'll get through this. I'm going to read a poem from, I have a book called Violet Ideologies. It's actually my second book. And the poem that I want to read, am I still there? Oh, sorry. I lost my screen for a minute. It's called Hegemony of English. The origin of the poem is from the phrase, English is the international language of business. And I was thinking of that in terms of, I had just seen the science fiction movie Arrival, which referenced the Worf-Sapir language theory, which states that the language that a person speaks affects how they think. And so if English is the international language of business, I can't help but be a capitalist, and I am not. So that's kind of where this came from. There are also a couple of references to William Blake in here as well, whose poem, Marriage of Heaven and Hell, I kind of followed for the redefinition of some of the terms of the discourse. So this is Hegemony of English. The epitaph is from the Supreme Court of the United States, Citizens United decision, money is speech. What the hegemony of English sounds like, according to one COO, ad load will play a less significant factor driving revenue forward, end quote. That to stimulate meaning, value, as it could provide the color for how one sees the world, Worf. Where in translation, risky as it is, the soft parts may be gutted out like with oysters. In a vision, I keep seeing stars falling from the sky and people running, protests, unrest, stress in the population, the sign of infinity, not sure what it means. Fires, more images of drought, no snow where there should be snow, a caterpillar dissolving into liquid as the unraveling of the old system. It's like every day, you can't believe this is happening, where neoliberal oligarchs get to keep raking in the cash with their ecocidal warmongering exploitation, end quote. Here it also means a spiritualized process, one we internalize that makes us who we are, not just manufacturing things we can sell. But then we are more interested in the performance than in whether it's true, aren't we? It says, as a printer's devil crosses the half-lit stage, muttering. It's never quite possible to hear what he's saying, but he's the key. He knows something, but someone pulls his beard, flicks his face. Okay, so where does this go? He knows something. Yeah, he knows we're doomed. So what are we going to save on next? It's true we share a common corporate language, which is, after all, what we have to close a deal. But our words still slide along edges and disappear like notes, scoffed up in that vacancy of air, its eddies moving almost at right angles to us. Pinker cites an ingenious study on the mental life of infants, suggests a comparison to monkeys, but for the moment, we're stuck in a whirling phonological loop, our prison house, the austere limits of an austere world. And in that shadow, against a burning sky, a flea. Tremble at the voice heralding us in our international language, fluent and deterministic, a cacophony, all of that species grinning and snatching, its sound like coins crashing. Blake's hell is a verbal possibility too, an unstable isotope, elusive as an unmarked grave. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And our next poet will be Ruth Smullen.
Unmute. Okay. Can you hear me? Great. Okay. Thank you, New England Poetry Club. A purple like no other. Replacement for my mother's cherished lilac, murdered by my father's zealous pruning, her then new lilac, his penance and success. Limbs like the arms of a supplicant reaching toward the sun, year after year covered with huge clusters, deep reddish purple, intense perfume filling the air. For 2 years, the aged trunks, weighed down by winter's wet snows, lay on the ground as rabbits ate the tender ends of branches. By spring, 2 trunks were dead, the rest barely blooming. To replace it, unthinkable, my mother's favorite, now mine. Surgery was prescribed, dead trunks removed, others cut back severely. By summer, an abundance of leafy shoots had risen from every stump-like limb, the near dead miraculously birthing the new.
Thank you, Ruth. Karen Klein is next. Please unmute yourself, Karen.
That's just what I'm doing. Thank you. This is a poem about a road trip I took at Christmas time in 2019. It was not written until 2020. So the title of it is When We Could Still Go Home. And the closer is a senryu, the form of haiku that doesn't directly refer to nature. It not only describes something, but it resonates, I hope, with longtime family relationships. When we could still go home. Snow fingers clutch the jagged rock wall along Mass Pike. Their glazed white residue, defiant in the sun's relentless glare, which striates through dense, very tall, very thin, very bare trees. A stockade fence threaded with the light of late afternoon, flooding barren, snow-dotted farmers' fields, leaching out the loneliness so deep you can't bear it. But there may be a warming fire on the hearth when you get there, maybe a whiskey worth the trip. Going home, the rusted metal of old bridges. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And Mike Ball.
Okay, I don't do a whole lot of rhyming. I don't do a whole lot of forms, but here's a villanelle for Valentine's Day, a love-centered one. Twice love scalded, 2,000 times afraid. How risky to be called or to call, my dear. Now march again in the loving parade. We avert our eyes, hoping that the shade will shield us from love's every pain and tear. Twice love scalded, 2,000 times afraid. Some never seek nexus of man and maid. Some live love and know what they need to hear. Now, march again in the loving parade. Those still hurting from their 2 times betrayed cannot let lust and love balance their fear. Twice love scalded, 2,000 times afraid. Stripped lovers open to bruise and abrade. Are they beyond nude, skinless and sincere? Now, march again in the loving parade. Be brave and foolish, or be safe and staid. Let fear turn to leer, and at last to cheer. Twice love scalded, 2,000 times afraid. Now, march again in the loving parade. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you so much. So wonderful to have your villanelle on Valentine's Day. And our next reader will be Tom DeFreitas. Welcome, Tom.
Oh, he's not here?
I think Tom has left.
Yeah, he's left.
Okay. So our next reader then will be Paul Smith.
Okay. Am I hearable? Yes, I am. Thank you. All right, my poem is called I Wish, I Wish. Because we're in the land of poetry, it is about another poet, and I wish I could write like him. I wish I could write poems like Charles Bukowski, but I can't. not because I can't write or can't spell or even swear, but because I have never lived the experiences and episodes and events that he has, and probably never will. I will never fornicate with as many different women in the space of 1 month, or is it 1 week, as he does, so he says. I will never drink as much alcohol in 1 week as he does. I say alcohol because it doesn't matter what's in the bottle, rye or gin or vodka, scotch or wine, anything that would help me pass out. And if I did all that he did, including and especially the fornicating and drinking, where and when would I have time to write? The best part of his writing is that in his poems, they turn into essays, and his essays turn into poems in your mind. And why? Because you wish them to be so. And I think most of all, I could not write like Charles Bukowski because I could not fabricate like him. Yes, I did say lie. Surely most of what he tells us must be imagination. But hear how great it is. It must be wishes of the soul, pure and untainted. Maybe not for him, but surely for me. But what am I most jealous of? And I say jealous because jealousy is so much deeper and painful than envious, is that he loves and understands classical music, or he can sing and dance to any shrill tune ever written. He knows the name and history of any jazz musician of note. He can samba or waltz any time of the day. Yes, I wish I could write poems like Charles Bukowski. I really, really do. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And welcome, Steve Rapp.
All right, thank you, New England Poetry Club. And so this is a poem called The Poet and the Lamp. And I wrote it kind of in mind, thinking of all the people like myself who try to write poems and sometimes wonder if we're getting even close. So The Poet and the Lamp starts with a quote from the Arabian Nights. I went to seek my daily bread. I find that breadless I must fare. I cast a net 4 times a day, hoping to catch enough to feed my family, but more often find shards of memory, pitchers of dirt, and donkeys dead from endless rework. Once I found a lantern on the muddy bottom, ecstatic to find it gin, unaware that success could be more than 1,800 years at the bottom of the sea. That the boon may be the undoing of the peaceful rhythm of the home, and the end of the harmony of tossing a handmade net upon the waves. For even if enchanted fish could be sold for hundreds of dinars, there will always be envious cousins looking to turn a poet's feet to stone. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We have a lot of poems about poetry, about Ars Poetica today. Nice. Our next reader is Kanamara Watsworth.
Thank you, and especially thank you to all the poets who have washed us with their work. It's wonderful. Cows in the apples. The 2 obedient Guernseys and the bull-headed Jersey saunter back from milking, udders swinging empty. They pass the meadow to the lower pasture. This is the time after the fat of summer. And they are downwind from the apple trees. The Jersey breaks away, the rest follow. plant themselves on the perfumed carpet of fermenting drops and ignore the angry bees, as eager and sated as the cows. No amount of bullying can move these hulks trampling willy-nilly on their feast. They shake their heads, push us back. They will have their fill before they swagger down the road, happy drunks, licking lips of sweet apple off wet lips. Thank you.
Thanks, Kanamara. I'm sure many of us are looking forward to the fat of summer also. Our next reader is David Donna. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. And thank you all for the lovely reading. This piece is called Transfer. Through the window, my bedside light on the sidewalk, a glowing yolk untouchable by the still January night, where aluminum holds court over snowy pavement, splits my attention with the phone. I'm barely there, being perched too on your notional shoulder as you catch sight of me, chirping stilt-legged on a power line, as the scrape and occasional voices of late-night shovelers hover like exhaled vapor, risen, shivered through the panes. I got out by the skin of my skin. I've connected the dots you tapped on my downy frame. Here, address the pictured chickadee in his glass jar of daylight, the beak and bead eye, black-capped and sweet-cheeked, happy to be your hypocrite reader, to scratch out winter's sounds, not picking up on most things, thumbless, tumble-throated, catchphrases come cheap, keep keening. It's a stage. Back in the bedroom, my body is left sitting, stocking-footed, to receive the curiously cozy chill that seeps through the window into my lap.
Got out by the skin of my skin. Wow. Thank you, David. And our next reader will be Steve Honig.
Okay, thank you. Poets have been informed that April is the cruelest month, but it's not mine. I've never been particularly fond of February. And I'm going to read the last piece of a collection I wrote during this February, about this February, called The Dirge. And this part is the last piece, and it's called Deep and Dark. Deep and dark this life, stretched and skewed across rambling night, ebony bird cawing, praying incantations from far high cliffs, precipices fogged by premonition. Shattered like thrown crystal in an empty fireplace, shards reflecting lost fires of what we once called dreams. We are, all of us, floating on tides we do not understand. Beneath those silent, subtle waves we sink, buried with our tomorrows. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Wow. And our penultimate reader will be Pat Gibbons. Is Pat still here?
I don't think so. I don't see her.
Okay. All right. Well, then we will go to our ultimate reader, Chris O'Carroll.
Thank you, Wendy. Well, since this is Valentine's Day, and since I am all about originality and thinking outside the box, I'm going to do a love poem. This is Classic Hits. In sloppy FM waves, nostalgia rolls. I want to hold. You are the sunshine of. Each oldie on the golden dial extols your soul, your body's curves, your rockin' love. 3 chords can't search your whole exotic heart, but truly you're just too good to be true. When lyrics work, the instrumental part will find a way to find its way to you. We'll tap our toes and hum it once or twice, then dance to it as long as we're alive. Our song's a sacred air from paradise. Our song's a sweaty sock hop 45. Please, Mr. DJ, tell my girl from me that eager stuff I never think I can. Play her the tunes that say, I want to be your lover, babe. I want to be your man. Thank you.
Delightful. I think we can all unmute and give all the open mic readers a big hand.
Thank you all for coming. It's been a really wonderful afternoon of poetry. So thanks to Maria and thank you, Wendy, for hosting. And we hope to see you on the 24th. We have a Poet in the House reading. So details are on our calendar. So good to see you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, New England Poetry Club.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
You are unmuted? Oh, good. You can go to the other view and see.